In this session, we are going to study about different factors that affect the photosynthesis. So let us start. Now the factors which affect the rate of photosynthesis can be categorized into two types: internal factors or the plant factors and external factors. So internal factors or the plant factors are the factors that are the characteristics of the plant itself, like the number, size, age and orientation of the leaves, mesophyll and the chloroplast. So the more amount of leaves and the more size, the larger the leaves, that means the larger the rate of photosynthesis. Similarly, more number of chloroplast and more number of mesophyll cells containing chloroplast means the rate of photosynthesis will be higher. Besides that, the internal carbon dioxide concentration is also directly proportional to the rate of photosynthesis, as well as the amount of chlorophyll present inside the leaves. So all these internal factors, they are directly proportional to the rate of photosynthesis. Now these internal factors or the plant factors depend on the genetic predisposition and the growth of the plant. What does genetic predisposition means? It means that all these characters, the number and size of the leaves, the orientation of the leaves, whether the leaf is isobilateral or dorsiventral, or as we studied the monocot or dicot leaf, and the distribution of chloroplast and the mesophyll cells, all these depend on the genetic makeup of the plant. What kind of genes are present and what kind of proteins are they coding for the external characters as well as internal characters of the plant. It all depends on the genes of the plant or the genetic makeup of the plant inside the DNA. That is why these internal factors are dependent on the genetic predisposition as well as growth of the plant. Now during the growth of the plant, what all nutrition the plant has acquired, whether the conditions for its growth were favorable or not, whether there was any water stress or environmental stress, or whether the availability of fertilizers and manures and all the minerals required for the growth were available or not. Depending on that, the internal factors may vary, which will directly affect the rate of photosynthesis. Alright, so this was about the internal factors. Now talking about the external factors which are the component of the plants, which are not the component of the plants but of the atmosphere in which the plant is growing or the habitat of the plant, right? So the amount of sunlight which is available to the plant, the temperature of the region in which the plant is growing, then the amount of carbon dioxide, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, as well as the amount of water in the soil in which the plant is growing. So these constitutes the external factor that will affect the rate of photosynthesis. So how these factors will affect, we will study in detail in a bit later. We will most importantly focus on these external factors only. Alright, so we saw that there are several factors which are affecting the rate of photosynthesis, internal as well as external factors, right? So the photosynthesis is not dependent on one but all these factors, and these factors will simultaneously affect the rate of photosynthesis. That is, all these factors will work together in the same time and they will determine the rate of photosynthesis. So when one biochemical process like photosynthesis is affected by so many factors working at the same time simultaneously, then we follow the Blackmann's law of limiting factor. Alright, so when any biochemical process occurs which is affected by a large number of factors, then Blackmann's law of limiting factors comes into the picture. Now, according to this law, when a lot of factors are affecting one single process, then the rate of that process will be determined the factor which is the minimal in amount. Alright, so for example, if there is a plant in which the number of leaves are optimum, like it has a lot of leaves, a large number of leaves, the size of the leaves are also very large, the amount of chloroplast is also abundant inside the leaves, then the levels of carbon dioxide is optimum, and the amount of sunlight is also optimum for the photosynthesis to occur. But if you keep this plant in the climate of low temperature, now everything is optimum, all the other factors are optimum, that is favorable for the photosynthesis to occur at the higher rate, except the temperature. You have kept the plant in low temperature, which is not the optimum temperature for photosynthesis. So now the rate of photosynthesis will be directly dependent on this temperature only, and changing the temperature will affect your rate of photosynthesis. Alright, so the factor which becomes the minimum or the lowest among the several factors that determines the rate of a biochemical process or photosynthesis here, that factor becomes the one important factor which will determine the rate of the process or the photosynthesis. So this is the Blackmann's law of limiting factor. I hope this is clear to you. Now let us move on to the different type of external characters that affect the rate of photosynthesis. So the first external factor is the light. Now, when we talk about light, then we have to consider different parameters like the quality of the light and the intensity of the light, as well as the duration of exposure of light, duration of exposure of the plants to the light, right? So if we change the intensity of the light, then we observe that the rate of the photosynthesis differs. If we keep the plant at low intensity light, then there is a linear relation between light and the rate of photosynthesis. What does it mean? Let us understand with the help of a graph. So if the light is having a low intensity, then the rate of photosynthesis, so at low light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis increases linearly with the light. So if we draw a graph, then we will get something like this. The rate of photosynthesis will increase linearly. But what if we use a high intensity light? Then in case of high intensity, when we increase the intensity of the light, then the other factors become limiting. Alright, so whatever factor that you will increase, that factor will not determine the rate of the photosynthesis, because according to the Blackmann's law of limiting factor, some or the other factor will become minimum in its amount, right? Because you are increasing this particular factor, the other factor will become limiting. So now that factor will now determine the rate of photosynthesis. And at high intensity, the rate of photosynthesis will increase to one level like this, and after some time it will become constant. That means there will be no further increase in the rate of photosynthesis if we keep on increasing the intensity of light. At low light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis will increase up to a point linearly. Then after, beyond that point, if we still keep on increasing the intensity, then the rate of photosynthesis will become constant after some time. So this is how the intensity of the light affects the rate of photosynthesis. And now some other factor will become the limiting factor. Alright, now it is interesting to note that the light saturation occurs at the 10% of the sunlight. That means that only the 10% of the sunlight which is available in the nature is sufficient for the photosynthesis to occur. And the green plants utilize only that 10% of sunlight, and they obtain their saturation at the 10% and no more light is required. So the light is rarely a limiting factor in nature, because the plants are reaching their maximum at 10% only. So in nature the sunlight is available in abundance everywhere. So light is rarely a limiting factor in nature. The only exceptions are the plants which are growing in the shade or the plants growing in the dense forest. Alright, so light is rarely a limiting factor in nature. Now, if you go on increasing the intensity of the light, then photooxidation of the chlorophyll might also occur, and that will decrease the rate of photosynthesis. So photooxidation is the breakdown of the chlorophyll or the chloroplast when the light intensity is very high, or if you increase the light exposure to a very long time, then photooxidation may occur that will damage the chloroplast, and then the rate of photosynthesis will automatically decline. Alright, so this was about how the light as an external factor affects the rate of photosynthesis. Moving on to the next external factor, which is the carbon dioxide concentration. Now, carbon dioxide concentration is the major limiting factor here. Why? Because in the atmosphere, the level of carbon dioxide is only 0.3 to 0.4%. So the concentration is very low in the atmosphere of carbon dioxide. Hence, it is the major limiting factor for photosynthesis. Now, it has been reported that if we increase the concentration to about 0.05%, the plants start to show a higher rate of photosynthesis. Alright, around 0.05%. Now, if we talk about the C3 and C4 plants, then C3 and C4 plants differ in their response to carbon dioxide concentration. When there is a high carbon dioxide concentration but the light intensity is low, then C3 and C4 plants show no response to this low light and high carbon dioxide concentration. But if we increase the intensity of the light along with the concentration of carbon dioxide, then the rate of photosynthesis also starts to increase. Now, the C3 and C4 plants attain their saturation at different levels. For C4 plants, the saturation occurs at 360 microliter per liter of carbon dioxide. Whereas in case of C3 plants, their saturation occurs beyond 450 microliter per liter of atmospheric carbon dioxide. The reason can be obvious because we have already studied about the C3 and C4 plants, and C4 plants, because of their adaptation, have Kranz anatomy in which they are able to concentrate carbon dioxide inside the bundle sheath. Hence, they do not require very much carbon dioxide from the air. So, they get saturated at a lower level, 360 microliter per liter. But C3 plants have no such adaptation, and therefore they attain saturation in a bit larger concentration, that is 450 microliter per liter of carbon dioxide. Alright, and because of this property that C3 plants show an increase in the rate of photosynthesis when the carbon dioxide concentration is increased, therefore the C3 plants are grown in greenhouses. Some of the crops like tomato and bell pepper, they are the greenhouse crops. They are grown inside the greenhouse. If you are aware of the greenhouse, then greenhouse is a special type of compartment made up of glass in which the plants are grown, crops such as tomatoes and bell pepper, which show response to a higher carbon dioxide concentration. Now, a high level of carbon dioxide concentration is maintained inside the greenhouse so that because of the high level of carbon dioxide, the rate of photosynthesis is also increased in these plants, and hence the productivity and yield of these greenhouse crops are more. Alright, so these two examples of greenhouse crops are important, tomato and bell pepper, which are grown in the greenhouses. Alright, so this was about the carbon dioxide concentration and how it affects the photosynthesis. Now the next factor is the temperature. Now we know that photosynthesis has two steps, a light reaction and a dark reaction. If we talk about the temperature, then the light reactions are very less affected by fluctuation in the temperature. Although light reaction is also sensitive to temperature, but it is not very much affected with change in temperature. But the dark reaction, which involves a lot of enzymes for the reactions to occur, it is more sensitive towards the temperature. Therefore, the C4 plants show higher rate of photosynthesis at high temperature, and the C3 plants, they show higher rate of photosynthesis at low temperature only. Alright, so because we know that the C4 plants are adapted to grow at dry and hot climate, they are able to tolerate the high temperatures, so they are able to carry on photosynthesis at higher rate in higher temperatures only, But the C3 plants, they are not the tropical plants, but mostly they are the temperate plants. The C4 plants are the tropical plants. They grow at higher temperatures in the dry and hot climates. But the C3 plants, they grow in the temperate region where the temperatures are not very high. So they have a very lower temperature optimum. Lower temperature optimum means that they attain a higher rate of photosynthesis at low temperature only. Alright, so the light reaction and dark reaction will occur in both C3 and C4 plants. Light reaction is less affected by the change in temperature, but dark reaction will be more sensitive towards the temperature, because the dark reaction depends on several enzymatic reactions, and enzymes are more sensitive to temperature. Alright, and each enzyme has its own temperature optimum, and depending on that, the temperature will affect the rate of photosynthesis in dark reaction. Alright, and this point I already discussed when I told you about the C4 and C3 plants. The tropical plants like the C4 plants, they show higher rate of photosynthesis at high temperature, and the temperate plants like the C3 plants, they have a lower temperature optimum. Now coming to the final external factor, which is the water. Now water is one of the raw materials of photosynthesis, right? And it has been shown that the water does not have a direct effect, but it affects the rate of photosynthesis indirectly. So how it affects indirectly? Whenever there is a water stress, then because of the water stress or the scarcity of the water, the stomata of the plants, they get closed so that transpiration can be controlled. No more water can be lost. And when the stomatas close, we know that the concentration of the carbon dioxide decreases inside the leaves, because the atmospheric oxygen cannot enter the leaf. Gaseous exchange stops. And when the carbon dioxide cannot enter the leaf, then the rate of photosynthesis will decline, because carbon dioxide is required for photosynthesis to occur, right? So in this way, the water is indirectly affecting the rate of photosynthesis. Also, in the case of water stress, the leaves start to wilt, right? So when the leaves will start to wilt, then their surface area will be reduced, and when the surface area will be reduced, then the leaf will not get the optimum amount of sunlight. That will lead to a lower rate of photosynthesis, right? So if a leaf is like this, this leaf is not wilted, so its area is exposed very well to the incoming sunlight. Hence the rate of the photosynthesis will go on very well. But in case of water stress, this leaf will wilt and its surface area will decrease like this. So this leaf can wilt, alright, and its surface area which was exposed to sunlight, it will decrease. So as compared to the previous case, less amount of sunlight will be utilized and less rate of photosynthesis will be observed. So this is how the water indirectly affects the rate of photosynthesis. I hope this is clear. So I hope all the factors, including the external factors like water, temperature, carbon dioxide concentration, as well as light, along with the internal or the plant factors, which we discussed briefly, and the Blackmann's law of limiting factors, all the points related to the factors that directly or indirectly affect the rate of photosynthesis is clear to you. That's all for this lecture. Thank you so much.